Hello and welcome to our virtual meeting. I'm Julia and I'm joined today for this presentation by several members of the Blue Line and Orange Line project teams. Thank you for taking the time to review this presentation and provide your feedback. We'll start with an overview of the Orange Line and Blue Line projects. Then we will share some information about proposed light rail stations on each of the projects. Let's get started. Capital Metro began development of the Project Connect Vision Plan in 2016. In December 2018, the Capital Metro Board of Directors approved the Project Connect Vision Plan, later called the System Plan, which identified corridors for potential investment in high capacity transit, or HCT. The Orange Line and the Blue Line were identified as dedicated pathway HCT corridors in this plan. In 2019, the Austin City Council approved the Austin Strategic Mobility Plan, or ASMP, which established a policy goal to quadruple the share of commuters who use transit to achieve a 50-50 mode split by 2039. The Project Connect Vision Plan is included as an integral part of the ASMP, and both initiatives provide a way forward for addressing the current and future mobility challenges the region faces. Mobility challenges are partially driven by historic and future population growth, with the Austin population projected to double by 2040. The Orange Line is defined as light rail transit, or LRT, operating in a dedicated transitway from Tech Ridge Park and Ride on the northern end of the corridor to just north of Slaughter Lane on the southern end of the corridor. 21 stations are proposed along the route. The placement of these facilities will be coordinated with the community. Service would operate every 10 to 15 minutes. Given recent trends in federal funding, the funding approved by City of Austin voters as part of Proposition A would provide the local match to build an initial investment in the Orange Line from Stasny Lane to North Lamar Transit Center. However, the project team is clearing the entire corridor from Slaughter Lane to Tech Ridge Park and Ride through the federal NEPA process in the event that additional federal or other funding becomes available to expedite construction of the full corridor. The Blue Line project is defined as a light rail service that would operate in an 8.2-mile dedicated transitway from Republic Square in downtown Austin on the northern end to Austin Bergstrom International Airport on the southern end. It would operate along portions of the existing Route 20. Up to 11 stations are proposed along the Blue Line, and similar to Orange Line, service would operate every 10 to 15 minutes. The Orange Line and the Blue Line are on similar project implementation tracks as shown in this graphic. This graphic is designed to represent the entire project life cycle with a focus on the phase we are in now, indicated by the shaded box. Prior to this phase, as shown, the Orange and Blue Line locally preferred alternatives were unanimously adopted by the Capital Metro Board of Directors and endorsed by Austin City Council on June 10, 2020. In November 2020, the City of Austin voters approved an 8.75-cent tax rate increase to help fund the next phase of implementation for the system plan, which includes both the Orange and Blue Lines, and allowed us to enter into the phase we are in now, known as NEPA, or the environmental phase. Earlier this year, we shared some information with the community on the NEPA scoping process for both projects and explain what to expect from the NEPA process over the next few years. We are now moving to the next step of the environmental or NEPA process, which is the development of the draft environmental impact statement. After the NEPA phase is complete, the project can move into final design and then construction and eventually testing and operation. An important aspect of this graphic is to note that public engagement will be conducted throughout this phase and future phases of the project. For more information about the project and the NEPA process, you can access the materials developed for our scoping phase outreach at projectconnect.com. The Blue Line and the Orange Line also share similar corridor design milestones. At the same time as the environmental process that you saw on the previous slide is underway, The engineering teams are working on the preliminary design plans for the projects. The environmental analysis and the preliminary engineering work hand in hand and will influence each other as we work towards a final environmental impact statement and final 30% design plans. We plan to talk with you more about the engineering process of developing design alternatives and selecting a preferred alternative for particularly challenging areas in the corridors later this year as we work towards completion of the 15% design plans. We will also revisit this diagram in future presentations to update you on our progress and talk about what's happening next. As you can see, after the NEPA and preliminary engineering phase, the project moves into final design. And with final design comes its own list of items included and the associated public input. As you can see, we are still in the process of developing 15% design plans. During this time, we are completing the activities you see in the second column. In the third column, you can see the types of information we'll be asking for your input on as we complete our 15% design plans. Ultimately, the design work that we're doing now helps us explore and determine options for solving the complex engineering challenges we see in both corridors. We have limited space for transportation in the existing right-of-way, which leads us to consider trade-offs for managing and prioritizing the use of the space that is already designated and determining where we need to acquire more space at street level. If more space can't be acquired, or other geographical and operational challenges make street level transit way unreasonable or unfeasible, we consider other options, like building the transit way above or below street level. But as you can imagine, building tunnels and bridges comes with their own complex engineering challenges and costs. Tunnels may increase conflicts with underground utilities and brings challenges associated with determining where a tunnel begins and ends, referred to as portals. Elevated transitways bring visual impacts associated with overhead structures and stations, as well as increased costs and accessibility considerations. For today, the important thing to keep in mind is that as the transitway goes, either at, above, or below street level, a station may follow. Because those two decisions, the transitway design and the station design, are so linked, we aren't yet able to say with certainty the type of station we are moving forward with at each location. But later we can give you some idea of what we're no longer considering in some areas so that we can facilitate a deeper dialogue about the stations themselves, including design, amenities, and access. With that, we are going to move into a review of the station locations and different station types we can consider for orange and blue line light rail stations. Generally speaking, light rail station platforms will offer more room for passenger movement and offer more amenities than many of the bus stops and even the existing red line stations that you might be familiar with in our community. On both projects, light rail stations are proposed to be about 400 feet long, which is about the length of a standard city block downtown, and as much as 24 feet wide. For this portion of the presentation, I'll turn it over to Angel.
So this slide is a really high-level summary of how we evaluated where along the corridor to locate a station. Stations should maximize connectivity to the existing transit network, ideally providing stations that can be used by multiple transit bus routes or connect multiple light rail routes. Balance speed and access with stop spacing, meaning that when we zoom out from the station to see the radius of the area that a passenger could access on foot or on a bike, we are looking for a balance in coverage. We want minimal overlap in lower density areas, at the same time minimizing gaps in coverage. In higher density areas, we may want more overlap between coverage areas to serve the most users conveniently. Serve high population and high activity areas, meaning stations would ideally be located close enough to the places people want to go so that once they arrive at the station, they can walk or bike to their final destination with relative ease. Determining the distance between stations is referred to as stop spacing. Stop spacing for light rail systems is typically 1 mile between stations, with the stations closer in more dense areas, like downtown, and spaced further apart in the suburban areas. Balancing the number and location of stations is a difficult task. Too many stations mean slower service. Too few stations means lack of access. It is a complicated decision-making process that is also heavily influenced by our local geography. For a light rail vehicle to start and stop as designed, station areas need to be both straight and flat. By straight, we need essentially a downtown block's length of space that is free of curves or turns. By flat, we mean that the tracks can have a grade or slope of 0 to 1.5%. The placement of these stations is a complex challenge that seeks to balance connectivity, speed, access, and connections to high activity areas within the constraints of local geography. On the next few slides, you'll see ovals with dotted borders to indicate the general location of each station. Though a significant amount of effort has been put into determining these general locations, we still have some work to do to determine the exact placement of many of the stations. So it's likely that these ovals could shift in the future, depending on some of the larger decisions made regarding the design and location of the transitway. We'll start with Orange Line and transition to Blue Line. Please keep in mind that our station names at this point are just placeholders. The official names of the stations have not been determined, so we label the stations to reflect the general station area for discussion purposes only. Starting from the southern end of the corridor, the transitway follows South Congress Avenue, meaning all of the stations will be along South Congress. As indicated by the dotted orange line, the Slaughter and William Cannon stations are not part of the initial investment, so they would not likely be built as part of the first project, but could be built as part of a future extension. The Slaughter station would likely be near the Ralph Ablanado Drive and would include a park and ride connected to the I-35 via T-ramp. This T-ramp would provide convenient access for those coming from the south on I-35. The William Cannon station will be placed near the William Cannon Drive intersection. The Stastny station would serve as the interim terminus for the initial investment and would include a park ride and bus bays for multimodal connectivity. Based on preliminary design, South Congress would likely be an aerial station due to conflicts near the SH-71 and SH-290 frontage roads and Rodham Lane. The St. Edward stations would be located near the intersection of Lightsey Road. The Old Torf station would be near the existing 801 stop at Old Torf. The location of the South Congress and Auditorium Shore stations are still being determined. A general area is indicated. This is also the area that the light rail line will make the turn and begin to follow the alignment of Guadalupe Street. The Republic Square station will be underground. This is also where the orange and blue lines will connect. We'll run through the rest of the blue line stations after we finish with the orange line. The Government Center station, formerly referred to as Capitol West, would also be underground in the vicinity of 12th Street. The UT West Mall and 24th Street station will have high pedestrian activity and would likely be located in proximity to the West Campus entrance on the drag. Hemphill Park, another high pedestrian activity station, would likely be between 27th and 29th Street. This slide is an excellent example of station spacing for a moderately dense area. The final location of these three stations will be dependent upon the guideway profile and the available right-of-way near the key intersections. It should be noted that anywhere a station is located, additional right-of-way may be required. The Crestview area will connect multiple types of transit. As such, there is a significant opportunity to improve North Lamar and Airport Boulevard traffic flow, as well as create a signature station that creates a more walkable area. The North Lamar Transit Center exists today, but would be expanded as part of this project. This is the northern end of the initial project investment. The following stations would not likely be built as part of the first project, as indicated by the change from a solid orange line to a dotted orange line. Okay. As the density decreases, the distance between station increases. Since this part of the corridor will be implemented in the future, in the interim, these areas will continue to be served by the 801 Bus Rapid Transit, where they will tie into the North Lamar Transit Center. The Tech Ridge Park and Ride will also be connected to I-35 via a T-ramp. That concludes our review of Orange Line stations. I'll turn it over to Sarah to review the Blue Line stations.
The downtown portion of the Blue Line initial investment will operate in a tunnel with a Republic Square station and a downtown station in the lower part of downtown. These two stations will be more substantial and provide connectivity with the Orange Line and the Red Line. Each will have more than one platform connected by underground pedestrian concourses. At Republic Square, these platforms are located on 4th Street, just east of Guadalupe, and then on Guadalupe, just north of 4th, with the Guadalupe platform being built as part of the Orange Line. And this station is going to allow for immediate transfers between the two lines and allow an opportunity for the Blue Line to continue service north of Republic Square to the North Lamar Transit Center using the Orange Line alignment. The downtown station will have platforms on 4th Street, just west of Trinity, and those will provide concourse level access to the convention center. The 4th Street station platform will also be connected via pedestrian concourses to the station on Trinity, the Mac Rainey station, that will provide access to the Rainey neighborhood through an entrance on Cesar Chavez. From the downtown and Mac Rainey station, the Blue Line will continue south and exit the tunnel north of Lady Bird Lake and cross over the lake on a new bridge. This tunnel portal and bridge will impact the Waller Creek Boathouse, and the project teams have been coordinating with the Austin Parks and Recreation Department on this issue. The bridge will touch down on the south shore of the lake at the waterfront station, which will be adjacent to the Austin American Statesman site. From there, the transitway will travel at street level, turning east onto Riverside Drive and along Riverside to the Travis Heights station, and then across I-35 to the Lakeshore station. The Blue Line team is evaluating opportunities to improve bike and pedestrian connectivity to these stations and their surrounding neighborhoods, including filling in gaps in the sidewalk network and opportunities for a shared use path. Continuing east, the Blue Line travels at street level along Riverside Drive to the Riverside, Faro, and Montopolis stations. The Riverside station is going to be one of the more complex stations due to the complexity of the intersection with Pleasant Valley Road, but it also presents some of the greatest opportunities for transit-oriented development. We're working on incorporating into the Blue Line project the improvements that are planned as part of the City of Austin's Corridors program. The final segment of the Blue Line light rail continues east and includes the Metro Center station, which will be sited near Ben White Boulevard. The team is evaluating different station platform sites, and each provide different benefits, including transit-oriented development and park and ride potential. From the Metro Center station, the light rail continues to the airport, traveling past the Spirit of Texas Drive and turning south towards the airport on an elevated structure with a direct connection to the planned terminal expansion. Now let's talk a bit more about what these stations could look like. And for now, the content you're going to see applies to both lines. And later this year, we'll be talking in more detail about the unique aspects of each line's stations. For this discussion, I'm going to hand it off to Janet.
As we mentioned before, there are three broad categories of transitway design and associated station types from a vertical perspective. These include street-level stations, elevated stations, and underground stations. We've included a photo of each station type to give you a real-life example of what each category can look like. We'll take some time over the next few slides to dig into each of these categories. There are three primary ways that we can lay out a station platform horizontally, and each of these can be applied to any of the vertical layouts you saw on the last slide. In a center platform, a single platform is positioned between the two tracks. A side platform is a platform positioned to the side of a pair of tracks. For the orange and blue lines, a pair of side platforms would be provided to accommodate two tracks. A split platform is a station that has a platform for each track that is positioned split into two locations, usually on either side of an intersection. Let's talk about each of these in more detail. Here's a diagram of a center platform station. Each of the light rail vehicles, which are traveling in opposite directions, are served by the single platform between the tracks. This platform is the widest to accommodate the flow of movement for people going in each direction on the platform itself. To access the platform, passengers will cross the tracks at a dedicated crosswalk. Center platforms are the preferred layout because they allow facilities to be shared between both tracks, reducing the cost of maintenance and maximizing use in corridors where passengers are generally traveling in one direction in the morning and in the opposite direction in the evening. They also offer a more comfortable waiting space for passengers who are separated from car traffic by the tracks. This is a diagram of a side platform station. Each of the light rail vehicles, which are traveling in opposite directions, are served by their own platforms. In this scenario, each platform is about half as wide as is shown previously, around 12 feet wide, because they are only serving one direction of vehicle and passenger traffic. Depending on the direction passengers are coming from, they may or may not need to cross the tracks to reach the platform. This configuration may be used to optimize track alignment as it does not have the divergence around the station that you saw in the previous diagram, and trains run best in a straight line. This diagram shows a side split platform. Each of the light rail vehicles, which are traveling in opposite directions, are served by their own platforms, but in this case, the platforms are staggered and shown on the opposite sides of an intersection. Again, depending on the direction passengers are coming from, they may or may not need to cross the tracks to reach the platform. This layout is best suited for stations located in areas where the space for transportation or right-of-way is limited. Splitting and staggering the platform takes less space horizontally than either of the previous scenarios. This configuration is also well suited to stations at intersections where turning movements are balanced in each direction. This diagram shows two configuration options for an elevated station, including center and side platform layout options. We would use an elevated station in areas where the transit way is also elevated, as shown on the diagram. We would consider elevating the transitway and associated stations to address engineering or environmental challenges, including crossing over an existing roadway or other transportation-related infrastructure, or to limit impacts to bodies of water like lakes or streams. The last diagram shows an underground platform. Similar to the elevated station diagram, the platforms in an underground station can be placed between or to either side of the tracks. We would place an underground station only in areas where the transitway is also underground. We would consider lowering the transitway and associated stations to address engineering or environmental challenges such as avoiding conflicts with other modes that exist at street level, like cross streets and driveways, or to avoid conflicts with existing utilities like water, sewer, and gas lines. The Project Connect program plans to add a tunnel through downtown area that will serve the orange and blue lines and provide connectivity system-wide, bringing underground stations to the community. So we wanted to share some images of what that might look like. On the left, you can see what Seattle station access looks like at street level. In the middle photo, you can see the same system featuring the staircase from ground level to the platform underground. The far right photo is from the same system, demonstrating what an underground platform could look like. In addition to these areas, Capital Metro may include areas for food, beverage, and live music at the underground stations. As we've discussed, there are several different options for how each station and the platforms associated with the station can be laid out. Regardless of which layout is selected, there are similar amenity and access considerations to evaluate. Jonathan will go over some of these in the next few slides.
Great, thank you very much, Janet. When we think about station design, we like to think of the stations as being the sum of 4 different zones, which in this case we'll call zones A through D. Zone A is the station platform itself. Zone A is where passengers spend the most time, and it's probably what most of us think of when we think of a station. The station platform is raised so that the light rail vehicles can feature low floor boarding, meaning that passengers will not need to climb steps to board the rail vehicle. To access the raised station platform, passengers travel through Zone B. Zone B is the ramp area between the station platform and the approach walkway. As indicated here, Zone C is the approach walkway itself. And finally, Zone D provides connectivity to the broader community, including crosswalks, sidewalks, and bike lanes. We're going to talk about each zone in more detail, but some aspects influence design for all 4 zones. These include ensuring stations are fully accessible, ensuring stations are scaled to fit neighborhoods, focusing on community-centered designs, identifying opportunities for public art, budget management, and of course, public involvement and stakeholder engagement. Public involvement and stakeholder engagement is a critical element of the entire project development process. We always aim to balance public feedback with engineering and environmental reasonableness and feasibility. However, station design is an area of the project where we are especially able to incorporate the community's vision in development. So that's why we're focusing on the subject today, and that's why we'll focus on it again later this year. So let's take a closer look here at Zone A, which is the station platform. For this series of graphics, we're showing a side split platform here for demonstration purposes only. Many orange and blue line stations will not be laid out as side split platforms, although some will. When we think about Zone A, we're really thinking about a few things. First, we're determining what width is appropriate for the platform to operate as designed. We're also identifying what elements of the platform should be the same across all of the stations associated with each line, and what elements can change. For example, stations may need general consistency in layout length and width, but the number and appearance of some of the component amenities may vary by station. We're also considering how passengers will move through the station and around the platform to minimize barriers to these movements. We're also identifying opportunities for public art and options for increasing accessibility beyond meeting ADA requirements. This slide highlights some of the amenities that you'd expect to see at all light rail stations. Stations will include a canopy or shelter for shade and protection from the elements, which can also offer opportunities for architectural feature elements, signage that displays next train information and emergency messages in real time, wayfinding, which could be maps of the system, the line, and the station area itself, LED lighting, video surveillance, and emergency phones for safety, speakers for use in a public address system, seating and leaning rails for passenger comfort when you're waiting for the train, designated ADA waiting areas, guardrails as needed for safety and to protect passengers from vehicle traffic, ticket vending machines so that passengers may pay fares on site, and landscaping to improve safety and sustainability. So Zone A is often referred to as the pay zone, meaning if you don't have a ticket to ride the train, you're typically not permitted to use Zone A. Within Zone A, there are many opportunities for public art, including railing and shelters and opportunities for station-specific identifiers in signage and wayfinding. This slide shows some examples of what the Zone A elements look like in real life. Shelters, like the one shown on the left here in Charlotte, can double as design elements. The middle photo from Minneapolis shows a station at night with lighting, a different type of shelter, and a ticketing machine. The third photo shows an example of wayfinding signage from Seattle. Keep in mind that all of these elements would be offered regardless of the platform layout as discussed previously. Moving on to Zone B. Zone B is focused on accessibility for passengers who use wheelchairs, plan to take bicycles on board, or who have strollers, among other needs. Including a ramp to an elevated platform allows the vehicles to have level boarding, which is an important accessibility feature. Station ramps will have guardrails for safety, which can present additional art opportunities. When we design Zone B, we're determining things like minimum and maximum length, width, and slope. Zone C is the approach walkway, or the connection between the station ramp and the sidewalk or crosswalk. When we're thinking about Zone C, we are making decisions about minimum and maximum length, width, and slope, landscaping, guardrails, and drainage. Zone C can also present art opportunities through surface treatments and guardrails. It can also present customization opportunities through wayfinding signage and other wayfinding elements. Again, we have some examples to show you what some of these features can look like in real life. The photos from Minneapolis and Seattle on the left show the different ways that Zone B and C elements can work together to connect passengers from the greater community to the station platform, in addition to how you might expect to access a station platform that's elevated, like the example on the right. Finally, Zone D connects the light rail line to the surrounding neighborhood and destinations. These connections include sidewalks and crosswalks. The design priority for Zone D is to provide safe and convenient access between the station and the greater community. This zone may have a crosswalk pedestrian signal button and pedestrian protection from turning traffic. Zone D elements also include opportunities for community art in the sidewalks and areas around the station, as well as connectivity to bike lanes and bike storage facilities. By connecting to the adjacent sidewalk network and the broader community, Zone D elements enable connections to other public transportation options and, where applicable, to parking areas at stations. And finally, we have some real-life examples of what these elements can look like in Zone D. So these photos are from Charlotte, Phoenix, and Minneapolis and show how these Zone D elements can work in real life to connect the station area to the community around it through crosswalks, bicycle access, and pedestrian walkways. Of the 4 station zones, Zone D will have the most variability across stations, as each will be designed in the context of the surrounding community and the transportation network. So for example, a neighborhood station will emphasize pedestrian and bicycle connections to the surrounding neighborhood so that riders can easily get to the station on foot or on bike. On the other end of the spectrum, transit center stations will be larger and provide connections to multiple transit routes and shared ride services with pickup and drop-off areas. Regional park and ride stations will provide vehicle parking for folks who are accessing the transit by car. Finally, with the partnership between the City of Austin and Capital Metro and the establishment of the Austin Transit Partnership, or ATP, there are shared as well as distinct roles and responsibilities and interests for designing station area development. Capital Metro's role in the ATP is to design the station itself and the connections to the community in Zone D. The City of Austin is responsible for managing planning, zoning, and development of the broader station area. Together, Capital Metro and the City of Austin are working side by side to define the station context to ensure that adjacent development is transit supportive and affords more possibilities for more people while preserving neighborhood character and respecting the pride of each place. So to wrap up today's presentation and share how you can provide feedback on what you heard today, I'll turn it over to Abby.
Thanks, Jonathan. There are many options for sharing feedback and comments with the project team. Your feedback is critical now and throughout project development to inform our engineering environmental work. So please provide your input and share this information with others in your network so that they can also provide input. We'll compile and consider input from this virtual meeting website and the live virtual meetings the week of April 26th. To share your feedback, you can scroll down to right below this video to the community questionnaire and comment card on this page and share your thoughts. You can also email us, and you can direct that either to the Orange Line or Blue Line project teams by emailing orangeline@capmetro.org or blueline@capmetro.org. You can also mail us your comment. Again, you can address that to either the Orange and Blue Line project teams, and the address is 607 Congress Avenue, Austin, Texas, 78701. And you can call our project hotline anytime to leave a verbal comment. The number for Orange Line is 512-369-7703, and the number for Blue Line is 512-369-7774. All of these options are also posted on the project website at www.projectconnect.com/get-involved. Community input has been and remains a critical part of the project development process, and the Orange Line and Blue Line project teams We'll have new information to share with the community for feedback regularly throughout the next year. And we plan to visit the topics of stations specifically again in the fall. So we want you to stay up to date on project developments by planning a visit to our community office once it's safe to do so, which we all hope is very soon, by joining our emailing list and visiting projectconnect.com and subscribing to the newsletter, by liking us on Facebook at facebook.com/Capital Metro, and by following us on Twitter at CapMetroATX. You can also just check projectconnect.com regularly for updates. That's where we post all of our project information. Thanks again for joining us. Again, be sure to look below this video and share your feedback right now. Thanks and have a great day.